What kind of gibberish is that? You in America now? Speak English. The words hung in the hot, still air, sharp and ugly. The officer's voice was loud, pitched for the small audience of slowed cars and the single figure on the sidewalk with a phone held up. The sun was high and unforgiving, bouncing off the chrome of the patrol car's push bar. That was the first thing Dr. Althea James had noticed, the light. It was everywhere, bleaching the color from the day, making the asphalt shimmer. She stood perfectly still, her palms flat against the heated roof of her own sedan. The metal was warm, a solid grounding presence beneath her hands. She did not look at the officer. She looked at a point just past his shoulder, a crack in the distant pavement that seemed to hold all her focus. Her face was a mask of calm neutrality, unshakable composure. What Officer Dale Corrigan didn't know was that the gibberish was a specific, endangered dialect of Somali, spoken only in a single remote valley in the Horn of Africa. He didn't know that the woman he was mocking, the woman he had just pulled from her car for a supposed rolling stop, was one of 3 people on the planet cleared by the Pentagon to translate it in real time. He didn't know he was talking to a woman who held a top secret/SCI security clearance and whose work had directly informed national security policy for 2 decades. He saw a black woman with an unfamiliar lilt in her voice. That was all he saw. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. It had started, as it so often did, with the light. Morning light, specifically. The kind that slanted through the old windows of her father's house, carrying with it the scent of dew-wet roses from the garden and the promise of a quiet day. Althea James lived in that light. She had for 58 years. She was born in this house, and after her parents passed, she had returned to it, a sanctuary of polished wood, worn leather books, and the lingering phantom smell of her father's pipe tobacco. Her day began not with an alarm, but with the sun. At 5:30 she was awake. For 10 minutes she lay in bed, watching the light creep across the ceiling, listening to the house settle. Then her feet met the cool oak of the floor. Her routine was a ritual, a series of quiet, deliberate actions that anchored her. First, the kettle, a specific blend of black tea with bergamot and a single clove. While it steeped, she stood at the kitchen window overlooking the garden her mother had planted and her father had tended. It was her garden now. She had 21 days of leave remaining, a rare, precious block of time carved out after a grueling 6-month assignment in a windowless room deep within the architecture of national defense. 21 days to be Althea, not Dr. James, the asset. 21 days to prune roses, read novels, and exist without the weight of classified information pressing on her soul. The tea was perfect. She took it to her father's study. The room was the heart of the house. Bookshelves climbed to the ceiling, filled not with paperbacks but with hardbound volumes on history, linguistics, and philosophy. Her father, a professor of history at the local university, had taught her that a library was not a collection of books, but a collection of conversations waiting to be had. She ran a hand along a row of spines, the leather cool and familiar. This was her inheritance. Not the house, not the money. This. The quiet pursuit of knowledge, the unshakable belief in dignity. She sat in his worn leather armchair, the one with the permanent impression of his frame. On the small table beside it lay a smooth, dark river stone. It was her most prized possession. Her father had given it to her when she was 10, the day a teacher had dismissed her ambition to learn 5 languages as unrealistic for a girl like you. He had told her, "This stone has been shaped by water and pressure for 1,000 years. It doesn't break. It becomes smoother. It endures. Be the stone, Althea." She picked it up. Its weight was a comfort in her palm. She held it while she drank her tea, her thoughts quiet. This was her ritual of grounding. The world outside, with its noise and its haste and its casual cruelties, could not touch her here. At 8 o'clock, she changed into her driving clothes, simple slacks, a comfortable blouse. Today, she was going to visit Mrs. Gable, her mother's oldest friend, who lived in the next town over. The drive was part of the pleasure, a 40-minute trip through rolling green hills and small, tidy towns. She backed her 10-year-old sedan out of the garage. It was a modest car, impeccably maintained, no frills, reliable, like its owner. She didn't need the flash. She had learned a long time ago that true authority was quiet. It didn't need to announce itself with luxury badges or loud engines. The morning was beautiful. The air through the open windows was sweet and cool. She drove with a light touch on the wheel, her movements fluid and economical. She was a good driver, precise. She had spent years in high-stress environments where precision was the difference between life and death. It translated to everything she did. As she drove, she practiced her languages, not out loud, but silently in her head, a habit from years of needing to maintain fluency in over a dozen tongues. Today, she was cycling through Arabic dialects, noting the subtle shift in vowel emphasis from the Levant to the Maghreb. It was a mental exercise, a form of meditation. She was just entering the town of Northwood, a place she had driven through 1,000 times, when she saw the patrol car. It was parked in the shade of an old oak tree, nearly invisible until you were right upon it. She checked her speedometer, 29 and a 30. Her hands were at 10 and 2. She made the turn onto Main Street, coming to a full 3-second stop at the stop sign. She counted it. 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000. Then she proceeded. The flashing lights appeared in her rearview mirror almost instantly. A prickle of awareness, not fear, not yet, just a shift in the atmosphere. The beautiful morning had just been interrupted. She signaled and pulled over to the curb, her movement slow and deliberate. She put the car in park, rolled down her window, and placed her hands on the top of the steering wheel, where they could be easily seen. She had been through this drill before. Every black person in America knew the drill. The officer took his time, a deliberate display of power. She watched him in her side mirror. White, male, mid-30s, the kind of build that came from a gym, not from labor. He had a certain swagger in his walk, the roll of the shoulders that spoke of a man comfortable with his own authority. He stopped just behind her passenger door, forcing her to turn uncomfortably to see him. Another small assertion of dominance, license and registration. His voice was flat, bored. "Of course, officer," Althea said. Her own voice was calm, measured. She reached slowly, deliberately for the glove compartment. She narrated her movements. "I am reaching for my glove compartment to retrieve my registration and insurance." He didn't respond. He just watched, his hand resting on the butt of his holstered pistol. It wasn't a threatening gesture, not actively. It was a posture, a statement of fact. "This is the power dynamic. I have this. You do not." She handed him the documents along with her driver's license. He took them without looking at her, his eyes scanning the street. He glanced at the license. Dr. Althea James. He mispronounced her first name. Aldia. He said Altaya. She didn't correct him. It wasn't worth the effort. "I pulled you over for rolling that stop sign back there." "I'm confident I came to a complete stop, officer." She stated it as a fact, not an argument. Something flickered in his eyes, a flash of annoyance. He didn't like being contradicted, however politely. "I'm the one with the badge, ma'am." "I say you rolled it." He leaned closer, peering into her car. "Where you headed in such a hurry?" "I'm not in a hurry, officer. I'm on my way to visit an old friend." "Uh-huh." He walked to the front of her car, then back to her window. "You from around here?" "I've lived in the next town over my entire life," she said. He looked at her license again. "This address is in Oak Haven? You're in Northwood?" "Yes, I'm aware." The silence that followed lasted about 5 seconds. It was a heavy silence, filled with his unspoken challenge. He was waiting for her to get nervous, to talk too much, to give him something. She did not. She simply waited. Her heart rate was steady. She had faced down warlords in dusty tents who had more power and more menace in their little fingers than this man had in his entire being. She was not afraid of him. She felt a profound sense of disappointment. This was how she was spending one of her 21 precious days. He seemed to sense he was losing control of the encounter. He needed to reassert his dominance. He gestured vaguely at her. "You have an accent. Where you from originally?" That was when the shift happened. The air grew colder. "I was born in the same hospital as my father, about 20 miles from here," she said, her voice still perfectly even. "The accent you're hearing is likely the result of a lifetime spent speaking multiple languages." He smirked. A small, ugly twist of his lips. "Multiple languages, huh? Say something in one of them." It was a test, a trap, a demeaning little game. She had learned a long time ago that engaging in these games was a fool's errand. The only winning move was not to play. "I don't think that's necessary, officer." "I do. I want to hear it." His tone was no longer bored. It was demanding. Performative. He was aware of the person on the sidewalk now, filming. He was putting on a show. Althea felt the weight of dozens of eyes. The day, which had started with such quiet promise, was curdling. She thought of the river stone. Be the stone. Endure. She decided to give him something meaningless, a quick phrase to end this farce. She was on the phone with a colleague from work just before she left the house, discussing a minor translation detail from her last project. The language was fresh in her mind. It was the Somali dialect. She recited a short, neutral phrase, a proverb about the importance of water. The words were fluid, ancient. The officer stared at her. His face, which had been a mask of smug authority, went blank for a second. Then the smirk returned, wider and more contemptuous this time. He let out a short, barking laugh. "What kind of gibberish is that?" he asked, his voice booming for his audience. "You in America now? Speak English." That wasn't a question. It was a brand, an attempt to mark her as other, as alien, as less. The humiliation was meant to be public, the injustice casual. She felt the sting of it, not as a sharp pain, but as a dull, heavy ache, an ancient ache, the ache of her father, her grandfather, of generations who had stood in similar spots, under similar suns, facing similar men. She let herself feel it for exactly 3 seconds, the heat rising in her chest, the tightening in her jaw. Then she put it away. She packed it into a small, neat box in her mind and set it aside. Emotion was a luxury she could not afford right now. Now was for survival. Now was for precision. "Officer," she began, her voice a shade colder, a degree more formal. "You have my license and registration. You have stated the reason for the stop. Am I being issued a citation, or am I free to go?" The question, the calm, legalistic framing of it, seemed to enrage him. He had expected fear, or anger, or pleading. He had not expected a clear, concise assertion of her rights. His face flushed a dull red. "You're free to go when I say you're free to go," he snapped. "Now I'm going to ask you to step out of the vehicle." "For what reason?" she asked, her hand still on the wheel. "I smell marijuana." It was a lie, a blatant, desperate lie. The only scent in her car was the faint, lingering aroma of bergamot from her morning tea, and old paper from a book on the passenger seat. The lie was the final escalation. It was the tool that gave him permission to do whatever he wanted. Althea James took a slow, deep breath. The morning was gone. The peace was shattered. One of her 21 days was ruined. No, not ruined. It was repurposed, a shift in mission parameters. She had not sought this confrontation, but it had found her. And she had learned a long time ago, in rooms far more dangerous than this stretch of sunny pavement, that when a fight finds you, you don't just endure it. You win it, systematically. "I am stepping out of the vehicle," she said, narrating her actions again. She moved slowly, her body language broadcasting compliance. But in her mind, a different process had begun. She was no longer Althea, the retiree on leave. She was Dr. James, the analyst. She was collecting data. The officer's name, from his tag, Corrigan, the time, the location, the witness with the phone, the lie. Each detail was a piece of a puzzle, and she was already beginning to assemble it. The machine in her head, the one trained to find patterns and predict outcomes, was starting to hum. Corrigan thought he was in control. He thought he was the one with all the power. That was his first critical mistake. The hot pavement met the soles of her sensible shoes. The air was thick with tension. He gestured to the back of her car. "Hands on the trunk. You know the drill." She complied, her movements measured. As her hands touched the trunk of her own car, she felt a wave of cold fury, so pure and so intense it was almost clarifying. Not from fear, from disgust. Disgust at the pettiness of it all, the waste, the sheer unadulterated ugliness of a man using the power of the state to bully a woman on her way to visit a friend. He was a bug under a microscope, and she was already cataloging his every twitch. She looked up and met the eyes of the young man filming on the sidewalk. She gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. Acknowledged. Documented. The first piece of evidence was secure. The first move in a game Officer Corrigan didn't even know he was playing. He thought this was the end of the encounter. For Althea, it was just the beginning. The search of her car was a violation by inches. Officer Corrigan didn't just search, he desecrated. He tossed the contents of her glove compartment onto the passenger seat, scattering insurance slips and old receipts. He picked up the book, a collection of Rilke's poetry, flipped through it with greasy thumbs, and tossed it onto the floor mat. Each action was a small act of contempt. Althea watched, her face impassive. She was counting his movements, counting the seconds, counting the number of cars that passed and slowed down to watch. Counting was a discipline. It kept the rage at bay, transforming it into cold, hard data. He found nothing, of course. No marijuana, no contraband, nothing even remotely suspicious. His frustration was palpable. It radiated from him like heat off the asphalt. He had committed to a narrative, the belligerent, suspicious woman in the old car, and reality was refusing to cooperate. He slammed her trunk shut. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet afternoon. "I'm not finding anything," he said, as if she were the one who had made the false accusation. "But your attitude stinks. I'm taking you in for disorderly conduct. Turn around." Disorderly conduct, the catch-all charge, the one used when there was nothing else. It was the final desperate move of a man who could not stand to be proven wrong. He was creating a crime to justify his harassment. "Officer," Althea said, her voice still impossibly calm, "on what grounds are you charging me with disorderly conduct? I have complied with all of your instructions." "My grounds are, you're being a smart mouth," he snarled, pulling out his handcuffs. The click of the metal was loud. "You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." The cold steel closed around her wrists. It was a strange sensation. She had briefed men and women who wore cuffs as part of their daily reality, but she had never worn them herself. They were heavy. They were tight. They were designed to humiliate. He pulled them cruelly, forcing her arms into an unnatural position. She felt a sharp pain in her left shoulder, a shoulder that had been injured years ago in a fall. She didn't wince. She didn't give him the satisfaction. She felt the weight of the moment, the physical reality of it. This was happening. To her, here, now. For a fleeting second, the analyst in her mind went quiet, and it was just Althea, a 58-year-old woman in handcuffs on the side of a road, being arrested for a crime she did not commit by a man who despised her for reasons he couldn't even articulate. The humiliation was a physical presence, a hot flush on her skin. She let herself feel it, for exactly 5 seconds. Then, Dr. James was back in control. He walked her to the patrol car and pushed her head down with unnecessary force as he guided her into the back seat. The plastic was hard and unforgiving. The cage separating front from back was a stark reminder of her new status. She was no longer a citizen. She was cargo. As the car door slammed shut, she saw him talking to the young man who had been filming. He was gesturing, his voice loud, trying to intimidate the witness. The young man, to his credit, stood his ground. He didn't back away. He just kept recording. Another data point, the witness was resilient. The ride to the station was silent. Corrigan turned on the radio, a blast of loud, aggressive rock music filling the car. It was another petty act, another way to assert his control over the environment. Althea ignored it. She focused on her breathing. In for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4. A technique she'd learned in stress management training at Langley. It worked. Her heart rate slowed. Her mind cleared. She looked out the window as the small town slid by. The neat houses, the manicured lawns, the flagpoles, it all looked different from behind this caged window. It looked like a foreign country, a country she was suddenly an enemy of. She thought about her father. What would he have done? He would have been the stone. He would have endured. But he was a historian, a man of letters. She was something else. She was an operator. And operators didn't just endure. They dismantled the threat, piece by piece. The Northwood Police Department was a small, squat brick building that smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant, the smell of institutional bureaucracy. Corrigan led her through a side door, his hand on her arm, his grip unnecessarily tight. He was parading his catch. A few other officers looked up from their desks. They saw a uniformed officer with a black woman in cuffs. They registered the scene, their faces blank, and looked back down at their paperwork. The machine. It was designed to work this way. to see this scene as normal. She was placed in a small holding cell. The door was heavy steel with a small barred window. The bench was cold concrete. The air was stale. She was alone. The first thing she did was test the pain in her shoulder. It was a deep, throbbing ache. He had aggravated the old injury. She noted that. Physical injury. Another piece of the file she was building in her head. 20 days of leave remaining. The minutes stretched into an hour, then 2. No one came. No one offered her a phone call. No one read her rights beyond the perfunctory mumble in the car. This too was part of the process. The exhaustion, the isolation, the slow draining of a person's will to fight. They were counting on her to be tired, to be scared, to just want to go home. They were counting on her to plead to the disorderly conduct charge, pay a small fine, and disappear. That wasn't what was going to happen. She sat on the concrete bench, her posture perfect, her back straight. She was not a prisoner. She was a strategist observing enemy territory from the inside. She cataloged the sounds of the station, the ringing phones, the murmur of voices, the clack of keyboards, the specific cadence of a particular officer's heavy-footed walk. She was mapping the environment. Finally, after nearly 3 hours, a different officer opened her cell door. He was older, with a paunch and tired eyes. A sergeant's stripes were on his sleeve. "I'm Sergeant Miller," he said. His voice was weary, as if she were the latest in a long line of inconveniences. "Corrigan's finished his report. Says you were belligerent, refused to comply, and he smelled marijuana. The disorderly conduct charge is what we're going with." Althea looked at him. She didn't speak. She just held his gaze. She let the silence stretch. She had learned in high-stakes negotiations that the person who speaks first often loses. Miller shifted on his feet. He wasn't as confident as Corrigan. He was a bureaucrat, a manager of problems. "Look," he sighed, "we can process you. You'll see a judge in the morning. Or you can sign this, accept the citation, pay the fine, and be on your way in 20 minutes. He held up a clipboard. "I'd like to see the report Officer Corrigan filed," Althea said. Her voice was raspy from disuse. Miller's eyes narrowed. "That's not standard procedure. I am the subject of the report. I am being charged based on its contents. I would like to see it." Her tone was not demanding. It was factual. An immovable statement. "You can get it through discovery if you plead not guilty," he grumbled. "Right now, you can sign the citation or you can spend the night with us. Your choice." "Then I'll need to make my phone call," she said. He sighed again, a long, put-upon sound. He led her to a phone on a desk in the main squad room. It was another small performance. The walk of shame. She ignored the curious glances. She ignored the low chuckle from a corner where she could just see Corrigan leaning against a wall, smirking. She dialed a number from memory. It rang twice. "Maya," a voice answered, crisp and professional. "Maya, it's Mom." There was a pause. A fraction of a second where the professional lawyer daughter processed the sound of her mother's voice coming from a place like this. "Mom, are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm at the Northwood Police Department. I've been arrested." Althea kept her voice low and steady. She gave her daughter the facts. The traffic stop. The false accusation of marijuana. The charge of disorderly conduct. The pain in her shoulder. She spoke in a near monotone, a field agent delivering a situation report. "Okay, Mom. Okay." Maya's voice was all business now. The shock was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp focus that Althea knew well. It was her own focus, reflected back at her. "Don't sign anything. Don't say anything else to them, at all. Do you understand? I'm on my way. I'm about an hour out." "I understand," Althea said. "And Mom?" "Yes? We're going to burn them to the ground." Althea almost smiled. That was her daughter, not a stone. Fire. "Just drive safely, Maya." She hung up the phone. She turned to Sergeant Miller. "My lawyer is on her way," she said. "I will be remaining silent until she arrives." The look on Miller's face was a mixture of annoyance and the first faint glimmer of concern. A lawyer. This was an escalation he hadn't wanted. He had hoped for tears and a quick signature. He had miscalculated. He gestured back toward the cell. As she walked, she passed Corrigan. He was no longer smirking. He was watching her with a new intensity, a hostile curiosity. He still saw a problem, but he was starting to suspect she was a different kind of problem than he was used to. He was still underestimating her, but the seed of doubt had been planted, and Althea knew from long and brutal experience that from the smallest seed of doubt, total collapse could grow. She settled back onto the concrete bench. She was no longer just waiting. She was preparing for battle. The board was set. The pieces were moving. Maya James arrived like a storm front. She didn't burst in. She entered with a focused velocity that seemed to draw all the air in the room toward her. She was dressed in a dark, perfectly tailored suit, carrying a leather briefcase. She was Althea's daughter in her height and posture, but her energy was that of her grandfather, the pugnacious debater. She walked directly to the front desk, her heels clicking with sharp authority on the linoleum floor. "I am Maya James, counsel for Dr. Althea James, who is being held here," she announced. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the low hum of the station. "I need to see my client now, and I want a copy of the charging document and the arresting officer's report." Sergeant Miller, who had been hoping this would all resolve itself, looked up with a weary expression. He saw a young, sharp black woman in a power suit, and his weariness curdled into resentment. "You can see your client. The report you can get later." "No," Maya said. "It wasn't a negotiation. You are charging my client with disorderly conduct, a charge that hinges entirely on the arresting officer's subjective account. I will see that account now, or my next call will be to a judge to compel its release on an emergency basis, along with a motion to dismiss for frivolous prosecution. Your choice, Sergeant." Miller stared at her. He was used to public defenders who were overworked and private attorneys who were looking for a quick plea deal. He wasn't used to this cold, precise aggression. He hesitated for a moment, then gave a curt nod to another officer. "Get her the paperwork." Maya was led back to Althea's cell. When the door opened, the two women looked at each other. No tears, no dramatic embrace, just a long, silent moment of understanding. Maya's eyes flickered to her mother's posture, the slight stiffness, the way she was favoring her left shoulder. Her jaw tightened. "Are you hurt?" she asked, her voice low. "He aggravated my old shoulder injury when he cuffed me," Althea said, her voice flat. "It's documented." Maya nodded, noted, filed away. "They're getting the report. We'll be out of here soon." She looked around the small cell with disgust. "This is unacceptable." "It is what it is," Althea said. "Now, we make it what it will be." A few minutes later, Maya returned with a copy of Corrigan's report. They sat on the concrete bench, side by side, and read it under the dim light. It was a work of fiction. Corrigan described a belligerent and uncooperative driver from the outset. He wrote that Althea had shouted in a foreign language at him. He claimed she tensed up and resisted when he attempted to handcuff her. The smell of marijuana was mentioned prominently. "He's buried himself," Maya said, a grim satisfaction in her voice. "He's put so many specific, provable lies into an official document. He's a fool." "He's not a fool," Althea corrected gently. "He's arrogant. He's done this before, and he's gotten away with it. He assumes the system designed to protect him will function as intended. This time, the system is going to eat him alive," Maya promised. They posted the small bond for the citation, and Althea was released. As she walked out of the station, the late afternoon sun felt strange on her skin. She had been inside for nearly 5 hours. 5 hours stolen from one of her 21 days. In the parking lot, she saw Officer Corrigan getting into his personal vehicle, a large, lifted pickup truck with an aggressive front grille. He saw her. He didn't smirk this time. He just stared, his expression a mixture of contempt and something else. Something that looked almost like confusion. He had expected her to emerge looking defeated. She did not. She looked composed, calm, and purposeful. She looked like a problem he had not yet solved. The drive home was quiet. Maya drove. Althea sat in the passenger seat, the river stone from her pocket now cool in her hand. She watched the familiar landscape go by. It was the same as it had been that morning, but everything had changed. "The first thing we need is the video," Maya said, breaking the silence. "The young man on the sidewalk. Did you get a look at him?" "Young, maybe early 20s. College student, I'd guess. He was wearing a university sweatshirt. He was resilient. Corrigan tried to intimidate him, but he held his ground." "Good," Maya said. I'll put a post on social media, on the town pages. Someone will know who he is. We need that footage before the police lose their body cam video. When they got back to the house, the evening light was slanting through the windows, just as the morning light had. The house was the same. The scent of old books and roses was the same, but Althea felt different. The sanctuary had been breached. Not physically, but psychically. The ugliness of the afternoon had followed her home. She went to the kitchen and began to prepare a meal. Simple. Chicken and roasted vegetables. The familiar, methodical act of chopping onions and carrots was grounding. Maya sat at the kitchen table, her laptop open, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She was drafting legal notices, researching Corrigan's history. The two of them worked in a comfortable silence, a mother and daughter who understood each other without the need for excessive words. Found him, Maya said after an hour. His name is Leo Carter, a journalism student at the university. His roommate saw my post and tagged him. I've sent him a message. Good, Althea said, sliding the pan of vegetables into the oven. She felt the rage then. It had been sitting in that box in her mind all day, cold and contained. Now, in the safety of her own kitchen, she allowed herself to open the lid. She let the anger wash over her. It was a clean, hot fire, the injustice of it, the disrespect, the casual dehumanization, the mockery of her life's work, of her very voice. She thought of her father, of his lessons on dignity. She had held on to her dignity, but it had come at a cost. The cost was this fire now burning in her chest. She let herself feel it for exactly 10 minutes. She stood at the sink, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge and let the fury course through her. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just felt it, acknowledged its power, and then, with a discipline honed over decades, she put it back in the box. The fire was not for burning herself up. It was fuel. It would be channeled. It would be used. The phone buzzed. It was a message for Maya. Leo's responding, Maya said. He has the video. He says it's clear. He says he'll send it. He's asking if he should post it. Tell him no, Althea said instantly. Tell him to hold it. Tell him to trust the process. We don't want to fight this in the court of public opinion. Not yet. We want to fight it in a court of law. We do this by the book. We use their own rules against them. Maya typed a reply. He understands. He'll hold it. Althea nodded. The first piece was in place. The objective, third-party evidence. Now, for the context. Maya, Althea said, turning from the stove, this isn't just about Corrigan. Men like him don't operate in a vacuum. They are a symptom of a sickness in the institution that employs them. Sergeant Miller's casual dismissal. The other officers who looked away. The pre-filled citation form. This is a pattern. I know, Maya said, her eyes dark. So how do we prove it? We find others, Althea said. This man, Corrigan, he's done this before. I saw it in his eyes. The confidence, the arrogance, it was practiced. There are other victims. We need to find them. The task seemed monumental. How do you find the quiet victims of a system designed to silence them? But Althea's mind was already working, sifting through possibilities. She was a linguist, a communicator, but her real job was intelligence analysis. Finding needles in haystacks was her specialty. People keep records, Althea said, almost to herself. Not always official ones. Sometimes people just watch, and they write things down. She was thinking of her father, with his meticulous notes on everything. History was built on the small, forgotten ledgers of ordinary people. We start tomorrow, Maya said. 19 days of your leave remaining, Mom. Let's make them count. Althea looked at her daughter, so fierce and so brilliant. A surge of pride, fierce and protective, overwhelmed the last embers of the day's anger. They had tried to humiliate her. They had tried to make her small, but they had not understood. They had not attacked a lone woman. They had attacked a family. They had attacked a legacy. And they had started a war they had no idea how to fight. The meal was ready. They ate together at the old wooden table. The quiet of the house, a shield around them. The counterattack had begun. The next morning, Althea woke at 5:30, as always. The light was the same. The house was the same, but the mission had changed. Her 21 days of peace were now 19 days of war. After her tea and her time in the study, holding the smooth, cold riverstone, She and Maya sat at the kitchen table, which had been transformed into a command center. Maya's laptop was open next to a stack of fresh legal pads. Okay, Maya began, her voice crisp. The video from Leo is secured. It's time-stamped, clear audio. It shows the entire interaction from the moment Corrigan approached your car. It directly contradicts his report on multiple points. He never mentions smelling marijuana until the very end, after you question him. Your voice is never raised. The foreign language he mocks is a calm, brief statement. It's a start, Althea said, but a video of one incident can be dismissed. They'll call it a bad day, a misunderstanding. We need to establish a pattern of behavior. That's what makes it a federal case. Deprivation of rights under color of law. Althea knew the terminology. She had worked with the Department of Justice before. As a consultant on cases involving international crime, she understood their thresholds, their language. She knew the machine from the inside. So we find the other victims, Maya said. But how? People who get bullied into paying a bogus ticket aren't likely to come forward. They're intimidated. They just want to move on. We don't look for the victims first, Althea said, her analyst mind kicking into gear. We look for the observers, people who live or work along Corrigan's typical patrol route, people who see things day after day. The old man on his porch, the woman tending her shop, the mail carrier. Her mind went to her own father. He knew everyone on his mail route. He knew their habits, their troubles, their joys. He was a keeper of the community's rhythm. The post office, Althea said suddenly, the main branch in Northwood, the carriers who walk those routes. They see everything. It was a long shot, but it was a place to start. An hour later, they were in Northwood. The town looked different in the bright morning light. Less menacing, but Althea could feel the ghost of yesterday's encounter. She saw the spot where she had been pulled over, the oak tree where Corrigan's car had hidden. She felt a flicker of the cold rage from the day before and consciously pushed it down. Focus on the mission. The post office was a small, bustling place. Maya, in her sharp suit, looked out of place. Althea, in her simple slacks and blouse, blended in. She approached the counter with a friendly-faced woman. "Excuse me," Althea began, her voice warm and polite. "I'm trying to find a retired carrier. His name was Henderson. Robert Henderson, I think. He would have delivered on the west side of town for many years." She was taking a guess, a shot in the dark based on a half-remembered name from a community picnic years ago. The woman's face lit up. "Oh, Mr. Henderson, of course. Best carrier we ever had. Retired about 5 years ago. Still lives in his house over on Elm Street. A lovely man. Bingo." Elm Street was a quiet lane of small, well-kept houses. Mr. Henderson's was easy to spot. It had the most immaculate garden on the block, a riot of color and order. An elderly black man was on his knees, carefully tending to a bed of impatiens. He looked up as they approached, his eyes sharp and curious behind thick glasses. He had the sturdy, patient look of a man who had walked miles every day for 40 years. "Mr. Henderson?" Althea asked gently. "I am," he said, slowly getting to his feet and wiping his hands on a rag. "Can I help you, ladies?" "My name is Althea James. This is my daughter, Maya. I believe you used to deliver the mail to my parents' home in Oak Haven many years ago. The Jacksons." His face broke into a warm, crinkling smile. "Lord, yes. Professor Jackson and his wife. Wonderful people. You have your mother's eyes." He looked at Althea, a flicker of recognition. "Wait a minute. I saw you. Yesterday. On the corner of Main and Chestnut. The police car?" The air stilled. "Yes," Althea said. "That was me." Mr. Henderson's smile faded. A look of deep, weary anger replaced it. "Officer Corrigan," he said, the name tasting like poison in his mouth. "I knew it was him. I saw it from my front window. I knew what he was doing." "Mr. Henderson," Maya cut in, her voice gentle but precise. "We believe Officer Corrigan has a history of this kind of behavior. We're trying to prove a pattern." The old man looked from Maya to Althea, his gaze lingering on Althea's calm, dignified face. He seemed to come to a decision. "Come inside," he said. "I have something to show you." He led them into a small, immaculately tidy living room. It smelled of lemon polish and old paper. He went to a sturdy wooden secretary desk and unlocked a lower drawer with a small brass key. From it, he pulled out a series of thick, ledger-style notebooks. The box of evidence. He laid them on the coffee table. There were 5 of them. "I started this 7 years ago," he said, his voice low and steady. "When Corrigan was still a rookie. I noticed it on my route. He'd pull over the old cars, the ones driven by black folks, by the Hispanic guys from the landscaping crews. Never the new SUVs from the rich side of town. I'd see it 2, 3 times a week. Same thing. He'd get them out of the car, toss their vehicle, humiliate them." He opened the first ledger. The pages were filled with neat, methodical script. Each entry was dated. A time, a location, the make and model of the car, a description of the driver, a description of Corrigan's actions. October 12, 2016, 2:45 p.m., corner of Oak and 3rd. Corrigan pulled over a blue 98 Honda Civic, young black man driving, had him on the curb for 30 minutes, searched car, found nothing. Let him go with a ticket for a broken taillight. May 3rd, 2017, 9:10 a.m. Main Street, green Ford Ranger, 2 Hispanic men, landscaping equipment in back. Corrigan and another officer. Searched the entire truck, dumped out toolboxes, held them for nearly an hour, page after page, year after year. It was a stunning, meticulous record of systemic abuse. A secret history of the town, written by a man who simply paid attention. "I never knew what to do with it," Mr. Henderson said, his voice thick with emotion. "Who do you give something like this to? The department? They'd just shred it. I was waiting. I didn't know what I was waiting for, but I kept writing it down. I felt like I had to, for the record, so it wouldn't just disappear into thin air like it never happened." Althea and Maya stared at the ledgers. This was it. This was more than they could have hoped for. This wasn't just a video of one incident. This was the pattern. This was the context. This was the weapon. Althea reached out and placed her hand on top of the oldest ledger. "Mr. Henderson," she said, her voice filled with a profound respect. "You weren't just waiting. You were bearing witness. This is the most important historical document in this town." Maya, the lawyer, was already thinking practically. "Mr. Henderson, would you be willing to sign a sworn affidavit attesting to the authenticity of these logs? And would you allow us to make copies?" "I'll do more than that," the old man said, his back straight, his eyes burning with a righteous fire that had been banked for 7 long years. "I'll testify. I'll sit in any courtroom in this land, and I'll read every single entry out loud if I have to." Althea felt a surge of hope, so powerful it almost made her dizzy. The elder, the keeper of the records. He was the foundation of their case. They spent the next 2 hours with Mr. Henderson, carefully scanning every page of his ledgers into Maya's laptop. He served them iced tea and told them stories about her father. It felt less like a legal meeting and more like a council of war among old allies. As they were leaving, Mr. Henderson stopped Althea at the door. "That Officer Corrigan," he said. "He's a bully, but he's a confident bully because he has a protector. Sergeant Miller, his old training officer. Miller has cleaned up Corrigan's messes for years, buried complaints, made things go away. If you're going after the dog, you have to be ready for the owner." Another critical piece of data, the hierarchy, the front-line antagonist and his mid-level protector. Althea nodded. "We will be," she said. They drove back to Oak Haven, the scanned ledgers of precious cargo on Maya's encrypted hard drive. They had the video, they had the witness, and now they had the history. That afternoon, Maya drafted the official complaint. It was not a simple letter. It was a 20-page legal document. It detailed the events of Althea's arrest, citing specific statutes and constitutional amendments. It referenced the video evidence from Leo Carter, and it stated their intention to file a federal lawsuit for a pattern and practice of civil rights violations, citing a 7-year log of anecdotal evidence that they were in the process of corroborating. They sent it via certified mail and email to the chief of police, the mayor of Northwood, and the county's district attorney. "This is the opening salvo," Maya said, hitting send. "Now we see how the machine reacts." Althea knew how it would react. It would try to crush them. The system doesn't give up its power easily. But now, they were ready for the pushback. They had the truth, documented in neat, undeniable script. 18 days of leave remaining. The war was just getting started. The machine reacted exactly as Althea had predicted, with silence, then with dismissal. For a week, Maya's meticulously crafted complaint went unanswered. No call from the mayor's office. No response from the chief of police. The district attorney's office sent a form letter stating they had received the correspondence and it was under review, which was bureaucratic code for in a pile to be ignored. 18 days of leave became 15, then 12. Althea spent the days in a strange state of suspended animation. She worked in her garden, the physical labor a welcome distraction. She pruned the roses with surgical precision. She read her books, she drank her tea, but underneath the placid surface of her routine, the analyst's mind was constantly running, processing scenarios, waiting for the enemy's next move. She was living in the quiet before the storm, and the silence from the town of Northwood was deafening. Maya was less patient. She made calls daily, navigating phone trees and unhelpful administrative assistants. "They're stonewalling," she reported to her mother one evening, pacing the length of the kitchen. "They're hoping we'll get tired, that it will cost too much to pursue, that we'll just go away. This is the exhaustion phase. It's a deliberate strategy." "I know," Althea said calmly. She was polishing the riverstone, its smooth surface a comfort against her thumb. "Let them. They think time is on their side. They're wrong." The first official response came on a Tuesday, a letter from the Northwood Police Department's Internal Affairs Division. It was a single page. It stated that they had conducted a thorough review of the incident, which included interviewing Officer Corrigan and Sergeant Miller. They had determined that Officer Corrigan's actions were in accordance with department policy. The complaint was ruled unfounded. They had not requested Leo Carter's video. They had not attempted to contact Althea or Maya. "Unfounded," Maya spat the word, slapping the letter down on the table. "They investigated themselves and found themselves innocent. What a surprise." "That isn't a setback, Maya," Althea said, her eyes fixed on the letter. "That's a gift. They've just created another piece of official documentation, a record of their own corruption. They have officially endorsed Corrigan's fictional report. They have tied themselves to his lies. Sergeant Miller signed it." She saw the path forward with perfect clarity. They had tried the local channels, as they were required to do. They had given the system a chance to police itself. It had failed, predictably. Now, they were free to escalate. The next day, Maya filed a motion in civil court to get the unedited body cam footage from Corrigan's uniform and the dash cam footage from his car. The department fought it, claiming it was part of an ongoing personnel matter, a laughable excuse given their own letter dismissing the complaint. A judge, annoyed at the transparent obstruction, gave them 48 hours to produce it. The footage they received was clearly edited. The video file had gaps. The audio dropped out at key moments, particularly right before Corrigan claimed to smell marijuana. The part where he mocked Althea's language was gone entirely. "They tampered with evidence," Maya said, her voice a low, dangerous hum. "This is a felony. They are so arrogant they think they can get away with this." "They're not just arrogant," Althea said. "They're sloppy. Send the file to a forensic video analyst. I have a contact from an old project. He's the best. He'll be able to show exactly where the edits were made." While they waited for the analyst's report, Althea turned her attention back to Mr. Henderson's ledgers. They were a roadmap of Corrigan's abuse, but they were just one man's observations. They needed to corroborate them. They needed to find one of the other victims and convince them to speak. They focused on the most recent entries, cross-referencing them with public records. They found a name attached to a traffic citation for a faulty muffler that Mr. Henderson had logged as a 45-minute harassment stop. The name was Maria Flores. The address was in a low-income apartment complex on the edge of town. Althea decided to go alone. This required a delicate touch, not a lawyer with a briefcase. She found Maria Flores, a young woman who worked 2 jobs to support her mother and younger brother, washing her children's clothes at a laundromat. Althea approached her gently. She spoke to her first in Spanish, noticing the woman's fatigue and the wary look in her eyes. "Perdóneme," Althea began. "Mi nombre es Althea. ¿Puedo hablar con usted un momento?" The woman, startled to be addressed in her own language, nodded cautiously. Althea told her story, not as a lawyer or an investigator, but as another woman who had been singled out and humiliated by the same officer. She didn't press. She didn't demand. She just shared her experience. Maria listened, her hands stilling in the laundry basket. When Althea was finished, the young woman's eyes were filled with tears. "He did it to me too," she whispered in Spanish. He said my car was suspicious. He pulled everything out. My son's toys, my groceries. He dumped them on the street. He kept asking if I was legal. I was born in the hospital here. He gave me a ticket I couldn't afford to pay. I had to choose between the ticket and the rent. I paid the ticket. I know, Althea said softly. He made you feel small. He made you feel powerless. Yes, Maria whispered. We are trying to stop him, Althea said. We have evidence. We have other people. But we need your voice. Would you be willing to tell your story, just in a written statement? My daughter, who is a lawyer, can help you. It will be confidential unless you agree for it to be otherwise. Maria hesitated. Fear was a powerful deterrent. But as she looked at Althea, at her calm, strong face, her dignified bearing, she saw not a threat, but an ally. She saw a woman who understood. She nodded slowly. See, she said, I will do it. It was a breakthrough. The first crack in the wall of silence. That night, as Althea was documenting her conversation with Maria, an anonymous email appeared in Maya's inbox. The subject line was just one word. Corrigan. The body of the email was short. I'm an officer in the Northwood PD. I can't say who I am. What Corrigan and Miller are doing is wrong. They're shredding documents related to his complaint history. The body cam footage you got was edited by Miller himself on his desktop. The original file is on the department server, but it'll be wiped at the end of the 30-day retention cycle. You have about 10 days left. You need to get a federal subpoena for the server image. They won't see that coming. Althea and Maya read the email twice. The insider, someone within the corrupt institution, waiting for the right moment. This was the turning point. This was the key that could unlock everything. He's giving us the whole game, Maya breathed, her eyes wide. A federal subpoena for the server image. They'll have to comply. They can't lie to the feds. He's also giving us a deadline, Althea noted. 10 days. 10 days of her leave remaining. The countdown had become critical. We have enough now, Althea said. The video from Leo, Mr. Henderson's ledgers, Maria Flores' testimony, the tampered evidence, and now a roadmap from an inside source. We are no longer making a complaint. We are building a federal case. The next morning, Althea made a phone call. It wasn't to a lawyer or an activist. It was to a number she hadn't dialed in over a year. A direct line to a deputy director at the Department of Justice she had worked with on a sensitive counterterrorism operation. She had provided linguistic analysis that had stopped a planned attack. He owed her a favor. Mark, she said when the man answered, it's Althea James. I need your help. It's a civil rights matter, and it's urgent. She didn't need to say more. She had never used her connections for personal reasons. The fact that she was doing so now communicated the gravity of the situation more than any detailed explanation could. Whatever you need, Althea, the voice on the other end said without hesitation. Who do I need to connect you with? The head of the Civil Rights Division, Althea said. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. Give me an hour, he said. 45 minutes later, Maya's phone rang. The caller ID was blocked. She put it on speaker. This is Maya James. Miss James, my name is Sarah Jenkins. I'm a senior trial attorney with the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice. I understand you and your mother have a matter you wish to bring to our attention. The voice was calm, professional, and utterly no-nonsense. The professional ally had arrived. Agent Jenkins, Maya said, her voice matching the agent's professionalism. We do. We have a file ready to send you. I think you'll find it very compelling. Send it to this email address, Jenkins said, providing the secure government address. I'll review it immediately. If it's what I think it is, we'll move fast. They sent the file, a 100-megabyte compilation of everything. Leo's video, scans of Mr. Henderson's complete ledgers, Maria Flores' signed and notarized affidavit, the forensic analyst's report on the tampered body cam footage, which showed the precise time codes of the digital alterations. And finally, a transcript of the anonymous email from the insider. The response came 2 hours later. It was a single sentence. Miss James, I'm booking a flight. The game had changed. It was no longer Althea and Maya against the Northwood Police Department. It was now the Northwood Police Department against the full, crushing weight of the United States federal government. And they had no idea it was coming. Agent Sarah Jenkins was the physical embodiment of federal power. She was tall, dressed in a severe gray suit, and moved with an economy of motion that suggested immense contained energy. She met Althea and Maya not in a fancy office, but at their kitchen table. She had a single leather portfolio and a government-issued laptop. She had already read the entire file. "Dr. James, Miss James," she began, her gaze direct and analytical, "what you have compiled is one of the most well-documented preliminary cases for a pattern and practice investigation I have ever seen." She had an aura of competence that was deeply reassuring. She wasn't here to offer sympathy. She was here to prosecute. The insider's tip is the accelerant," Jenkins continued, opening her laptop. "A federal grand jury has already issued a subpoena for a complete forensic image of the Northwood Police Department servers to be executed tomorrow morning. They will not be given advance notice. We are also issuing preservation orders for all physical documents related to Officer Corrigan's internal complaints and disciplinary history." Maya let out a slow breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. This was happening, and it was happening fast. "Our primary targets," Jenkins said, her tone as clinical as a surgeon's, "are Officer Dale Corrigan and Sergeant Frank Miller. The charges will likely include conspiracy to deprive constitutional rights under color of law, falsification of a government record, and obstruction of justice. The server image will be the key. If we find the original, unedited body cam footage, and it matches your witness's video and contradicts the official report, the case is airtight." "You'll find it," Althea said. It wasn't a hope, it was a statement of fact. Men like Miller are arrogant. He thinks he's covered his tracks, but he won't have anticipated a full forensic sweep. Jenkins nodded, a flicker of a smile on her lips. "That's what we're counting on." She then looked at Mr. Henderson's ledgers, digital copies of which were open on her screen. "This is extraordinary. This man, Mr. Henderson, is a national treasure. His testimony will be the foundation that contextualizes everything else. And your testimony, Dr. James, will be the emotional core of the case. A woman of your stature and background, treated this way, a jury will be appalled." The word jury hung in the air. This was real. "What about the witness, Leo Carter?" Maya asked. "He's a hero," Jenkins said simply. "His video is the objective truth that cracks Corrigan's story wide open. We'll treat him as a protected witness." The next 24 hours were a blur of quiet, intense activity. Jenkins and her team worked out of a temporary command post in a nearby federal building. Maya liaised with them, providing supplementary information and clarifying details. Althea remained at home. Her role in the initial phase was over. She had built the weapon. Now it was in the hands of those who would wield it. She spent the day in her garden. The sun was warm on her back. She weeded the flower beds, her hands in the cool soil. It was a strange peace, a feeling of immense calm before a decisive battle. She thought of her 21 days, 9 days remaining. She had spent them not in rest, but in a fight she never asked for. Yet there was a sense of rightness to it. Her father had taught her to be the stone, to endure. But he had also taught her that history is not a passive force. It is made by people who choose to act. The following morning, at 8 o'clock sharp, 2 black SUVs pulled up silently in front of the Northwood Police Department. 6 agents from the FBI's Technical Crimes Unit, led by Agent Jenkins, entered the building. They were armed with a federal warrant. They were not asking for permission. The scene, as it was later described to Althea by Maya, who had heard it from a jubilant Agent Jenkins, was one of pure shock. The desk sergeant tried to stall, to call the chief. Jenkins simply held up the warrant. "You can call the chief, or you can be charged with obstructing a federal investigation. Your choice." The chief of police arrived, sputtering, confused. He was a political appointee, a man who excelled at ribbon cuttings, not at dealing with federal raids. He was out of his depth. The tech agents went directly to the server room. The local IT officer was told to step aside. They began the hours-long process of creating a perfect bit-by-bit copy of the department's hard drives. Meanwhile, Jenkins and another agent went to Sergeant Miller's office. He was at his desk, a coffee in his hand. When he saw them, the color drained from his face. He knew instantly that this was not internal affairs. "Sergeant Miller," Jenkins said, her voice devoid of emotion, "we have a warrant for all physical and digital records pertaining to Officer Dale Corrigan. That includes any files on this computer." Miller's hand trembled slightly as he put his coffee down. He was a man whose entire career was built on controlling information, on making things disappear. Now, he was facing people who could see through his digital walls as if they weren't there. Officer Corrigan was not on duty that morning. He was at home. He had no idea what was happening. He had no idea that at that very moment a federal agent was finding a file in a folder deep on the server labeled admin_work. Inside that folder was another one labeled temp_edits, and inside that folder was a video file, the original unedited body cam footage from his encounter with Dr. Althea James. It was exactly where the insider had said it would be. Miller had been sloppy. He had hidden the file but hadn't securely erased it. A fatal mistake. By noon, the agents had what they needed. They left as quietly as they had arrived, leaving behind a stunned and terrified police department. The chief had locked himself in his office. Sergeant Miller was seen staring at his blank computer screen, his career flashing before his eyes. That evening, Agent Jenkins called Maya. "We have it," she said, and Maya could hear the grim triumph in her voice. "The original footage. It's everything you said. The mockery, the lie about the marijuana, the admission that he was arresting her for disorderly conduct because of her attitude. We also found deleted emails between Miller and Corrigan discussing how to handle your mother's initial complaint. They conspired to create a false report and then conspired to cover it up." She paused. "The U.S. Attorney has authorized their arrest. It will happen tomorrow morning." The reckoning. It was coming. Swift and precise. Althea felt a profound sense of gravity, not elation. A system was about to be held to account. Two men's lives were about to be irrevocably altered. It was necessary. It was just. But it was not joyful. It was the grim, necessary work of excising a cancer. She went to her father's study and picked up the river stone. She held its cool, smooth weight in her hand. She had been the stone. She had endured the pressure, and she had not broken. Tomorrow the water would finally break the dam. 8 days of leave remaining. But the mission was almost complete. The morning of the reckoning dawned gray and overcast. The sky the color of steel. Althea did not go to Northwood. Maya did not go. Agent Jenkins had insisted they stay away. "This is our job now," she had said. "You've done yours?" So Althea sat in her father's leather armchair, the one that held his shape, and she waited. She had her tea. She watched the light change as the sun struggled to break through the clouds. She felt like a commander on a distant hill, watching a battle she had planned unfold below. At 9:15 a.m., her phone chimed with a text from Maya. It was a link to a local news station's live feed. A reporter was standing in front of the Northwood Police Department. Behind him, the scene was one of controlled chaos. Federal vehicles were parked at the curb. FBI agents in their telltale blue jackets were moving in and out of the building. The reporter's voice was excited. "We're getting reports of a major federal operation underway here at the Northwood Police Department. Sources are saying this is the culmination of a civil rights investigation." Althea watched, her heart beating a slow, steady rhythm. This was it. The public exposure. The moment the curtain was pulled back. Then it happened. The main doors of the station opened. 2 FBI agents emerged, flanking a man in handcuffs. His hands were cuffed behind his back. It was Sergeant Frank Miller. His face was pale, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief. He, the man who had controlled the levers of power in this small town for so long, was being paraded in front of the cameras. He looked small, defeated. A few minutes later, the camera cut to a different location, a quiet residential street. An unmarked federal car was parked in front of a house with a large, lifted pickup truck in the driveway. The front door of the house opened. Officer Dale Corrigan was led out, also in handcuffs. He was not wearing his uniform. In his civilian clothes, he looked diminished, stripped of his performative authority. The smirk was gone. The swagger was gone. All that was left was a confused, angry man who was no longer in control. He was placed in the back of the federal vehicle. The door shut. The same kind of door on the same kind of car that he had slammed shut on Althea James just 2 weeks earlier. The irony was not lost on Althea. It was a signature of justice. The same restraints, the same humiliation, the same loss of dignity he had so casually imposed on others was now being visited upon him. Not out of vengeance, but as a simple, direct consequence of his own actions. The machine he had used as a weapon had turned on him. She didn't feel joy. She felt a quiet, profound sense of catharsis, a balancing of the scales. Later that day, the U.S. attorney held a press conference. Agent Jenkins stood behind him, her face impassive. The U.S. attorney laid out the charges: conspiracy against rights, deprivation of rights under color of law, falsification of records, obstruction of justice. He mentioned a brave citizen journalist who captured video, a diligent community elder who kept meticulous records for years, and a whistleblower within the department whose conscience compelled them to act. And then he spoke of Althea. This investigation began, he said, his voice ringing with indignation, when these officers arrested and attempted to humiliate a citizen of unimpeachable character and national distinction. A woman who has served this country with quiet honor for decades. They mistook her dignity for weakness. They mistook her composure for fear. They were wrong. They picked a fight with the wrong woman. He announced that the investigation was expanding. The DOJ would be conducting a full pattern and practice review of the Northwood Police Department, which would likely result in a federal consent decree forcing systemic reforms on the entire department. The chief of police had already tendered his resignation. It was a total victory, not just individual punishment, but systemic change. Althea watched the press conference, then switched off the television. The silence of the house settled around her. It was over. The counterattack was complete. The reckoning had been delivered. She got a call from Maya. Her daughter's voice was filled with a triumphant, breathless energy. "We did it, Mom. We actually did it. We burned them to the ground." "No, honey," Althea said softly. "We didn't burn anything down. We cleared the field so something better can be planted." That evening, she found an email in her inbox. It was from the anonymous insider's address. It was just 2 words. "Thank you." Althea typed back a simple reply. "No, thank you. Be safe." She knew she would never know who the officer was. It was better that way. They were a part of the system that was now healing itself. She went to sleep that night, and, for the first time in 2 weeks, she didn't dream of courtrooms or police stations. She dreamt of her father's garden, the soil rich and dark, ready for new seeds, 7 days of leave remaining. And for the first time, it felt like she could use them to rest. In the final week of her leave, a quiet settled over Althea's life. The storm had passed. The news cycle moved on. The gears of the federal justice system ground on without her, methodical and implacable. Corrigan and Miller were released on bond, their careers in ruins, awaiting a trial they were certain to lose. The town of Northwood was grappling with the federal oversight that would reshape its police force for a generation. Althea spent her days returning to her original mission: peace. She worked in the garden. She read novels in the afternoon sun. She drove the quiet country roads, the windows down, the air sweet and clean. She felt the tension that had been coiled in her shoulders for weeks finally begin to unwind. She had dinner with Mr. Henderson and his wife. He was a local hero now, though he shrugged off the attention with the same quiet dignity with which he had maintained his ledgers. "I just wrote down what I saw," he said. "It was Dr. James who knew what to do with it." She had coffee with Leo Carter, the young journalism student. He was bright-eyed and full of questions. His video had been licensed by every major news network. The money, he told her, would pay for his final year of college. "You changed my life, Dr. James," he said. "You changed mine, Leo," she replied. "You were brave. You held your ground. Never lose that." On the last day of her leave, with 1 day remaining, Althea knew there was one last thing she had to do. She got in her car in the early morning, the light soft and golden. She drove the familiar route to Northwood. The town no longer felt menacing. It felt like a place that had just survived a fever, weakened but on the path to recovery. She parked her car on the side of Main Street. She got out and stood on the corner of Main and Chestnut, the exact spot where Officer Corrigan had pulled her over. The sun was warm on her face. The traffic moved past at a polite, lawful speed. A woman walking her dog smiled at her. A man waved from his porch. It was just a corner, a patch of pavement under an oak tree. The ugliness was gone, cleansed by the truth. She wasn't there to gloat. She was there to reclaim the space, to overwrite the memory of humiliation with a new memory of peace. This was her corner, too. This was her town, too. This was her country, too. Dignity is non-negotiable. She had not let him take hers, and now she was taking back the very ground on which he had tried. She stayed there for exactly 9 minutes, the approximate length of the original traffic stop. She counted the seconds. She breathed in the morning air. She listened to the sounds of the town. Then, her time up, she turned and walked back to her car. The act was complete. That evening, Maya came over for dinner. They sat on the back porch, watching the sunset, turning the sky into a wash of pink and orange. They didn't talk about the case. They talked about books, about the garden, about Maya's upcoming vacation. They talked about the future. As the last sliver of sun disappeared below the horizon, Althea held up the smooth, dark river stone her father had given her. It caught the last of the light, its surface gleaming. "He was right," Althea said, her voice soft. "The stone endures." Maya reached out and placed her hand over her mother's. "The stone endures," she agreed, "and sometimes the stone wins." The next morning, Althea James woke at 5:30. She made her tea. She sat in her father's chair. Her leave was over. In a few hours, she would drive back to the other world, the one of windowless rooms and classified secrets. She would once again become Dr. James, the asset. But something had changed. The wall between her two worlds was more permeable now. She had brought the discipline and strategy of her secret life into her public one, and in doing so, had affirmed the values that underpinned both. She was whole. The quiet of the house was not a retreat from the world, but a base from which to engage with it. The peace was not fragile. It was earned. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.